All right, let's jump right into this explainer because today we're tackling a massive cognitive blind spot that honestly almost every single one of us is quietly guilty of. We all confidently walk around believing we're super observant, completely logical, and naturally the one exception to the rule. But what if the very way we define our own intelligence is just fundamentally flawed? Today, we are breaking down the uncomfortable but totally necessary psychological signs that you might not be quite as smart as you think. I want you to look in the mirror for a second and honestly ask yourself, are you really the exception to the rule? Because here's the thing. The scariest part of low intelligence isn't that it looks like some cartoon character making obvious comical mistakes. No, it's that it often hides right behind a mask of total, unearned confidence. A person can have access to absolutely every resource in the world, hold the absolute best education, and still operate with low-level cognitive habits that keep their potential completely stuck. It's entirely possible to be highly educated and yet structurally inflexible in how you actually process reality. And this brings us to our core thesis for today. Being smart, it's not about the fancy degrees on your wall, and it's definitely not about some standardized IQ test score. Psychology actually shows us that intelligence is almost entirely about the cognitive habits and the thinking patterns you practice every single day. True intelligence is dynamic, it's not static, it's a verb. It's something you do, rather than just something you are. So if you've been relying on a past test score or old academic praise to validate your intellect, you might be entirely missing the everyday behaviors that actually define an intelligent mind. So let's get into it. Section 1. The Trap of Ego. Dealing with extreme certainty and rigidity. All right, sign number 1 is driven by what we call overconfidence bias. You have absolutely seen this in action, right? Maybe at a dinner party or in a Monday morning work meeting. It's when the loudest person in the room speaks on incredibly complex topics with extreme certainty, but possesses literally zero self-doubt. They read one sensational headline and boom, suddenly they consider themselves the absolute expert. This happens because a highly limited understanding of a topic creates a very convincing yet completely false illusion of clarity. Basically, the brain doesn't know what it doesn't know, so it just fills in the gaps with sheer confidence. Here's the crucial difference. Truly intelligent minds, they get how incredibly vast human knowledge really is. They actually operate with a healthy dose of self-doubt because they constantly notice just how much they do not know. The more they learn, the more they realize is left to discover. Conversely, the rigid, less intelligent mind mistakes a lack of nuance and depth for being decisive. They speak with total certainty while entirely missing the actual messy complexities of the real world. They just prefer the comfort of an easy answer over the truth of a complex one. And that flows right into sign number 2, cognitive rigidity. This happens when you stubbornly hold on to a flawed stance, even when the data or evidence completely disproves it, just to protect your own pride. You treat the very act of changing your opinion as a sign of weakness rather than what it really is, a sign of intellectual growth. Let's be totally clear about what this is. It is a defense mechanism, plain and simple. Your ego perceives new information as a literal threat, so it shuts down your reasoning centers just to keep you feeling safe and right. The contrast here is just wild. Smart people realize that staying wrong just to protect your pride, that's what is actually embarrassing. So intelligent action means you update your beliefs the exact moment you are presented with new, strong evidence. You pivot. Meanwhile, a closed-loop mindset rejects new methods or ideas simply because they are different or because they challenge a really fragile worldview. Listen, changing your mind when the facts change isn't flip-flopping. It is actual intelligence in action. Moving on to our next section, the path of least resistance, where we look at oversimplifying and blame shifting. Which brings us to sign number 3. It's all about oversimplifying complex realities. See, our brains absolutely love a good mental shortcut. Why? Well, because the brain is essentially an energy-saving machine, and processing nuance burns a whole lot of calories. So this shortcut is the brain's attempt to reduce deeply complex, multifaceted issues into a simple slogan or a dramatic black and white story. Relying on a shortcut is simply easier and a lot faster than acknowledging that most truths in life are deeply layered, contradictory, and require some real mental effort to fully grasp. To spot this in your own life, pay close attention to the words you use every day. You might catch yourself heavily leaning on the word always to describe highly nuanced situations, like things always happen this way, or people always act like this. Using absolute terms completely shuts down any room for exceptions, variants, or a deeper contextual understanding. It artificially flattens a three-dimensional problem into a two-dimensional talking point. Or maybe you confidently throw around the word never
to completely shut down a complicated argument before it even gets off the ground. Saying, "I would never do that," or "that never works," is an incredibly effective mental shortcut. It gives you immediate permission to avoid having to actually engage with opposing evidence. Absolutes like these are giant red flags that your brain is taking the easy way out instead of wrestling with reality. Or, actually, maybe the worst one of all, completely dismissing a deeply layered reality by just shrugging and saying, "Well, it's just common sense." Using common sense as an intellectual shield basically guarantees the world you live in will stay incredibly small. Real intelligence recognizes that almost nothing deeply complex in economics or psychology or relationships is just common sense. If your thinking heavily relies on these oversimplifications, your understanding of the world is painfully limited by your own unwillingness to look deeper.
All right, moving right along to sign number 4, chronic blame shifting. This completely stems from lacking a vital psychological trait called metacognition. Metacognition is that rare, high-level ability to step back, analyze, and objectively critique your own behavior and thought processes. It is literally thinking about how you think. Without it, you are just blindly reacting to the world around you without ever stopping to question your own role in what happens to you. When you lack this metacognition, you inevitably fall into the constant blame trap. You're always looking outward and blaming everyone else for your outcomes. Your boss for your career stalling, your parents for your bad habits, or just vaguely pointing fingers at the system for your personal failures. By doing this, you are successfully avoiding the hard, necessary work of self-reflection. Let's be totally honest about this behavior for a second. It is the ultimate intellectual cop-out. It outsources your agency to the universe so you never have to face your own shortcomings. But highly intelligent people, they know this fundamental truth of psychology. You literally cannot fix a problem if you refuse to own it. So when they inevitably fail, and let's be clear, everybody fails, even the smartest among us, they are always the first ones to step up and say this exact phrase, "That's on me." Taking ownership isn't just about moral accountability. It's an absolute required mechanical cognitive step for real problem solving. Think about it. If it's your fault, it's within your power to change. And that leads us to our final section, the stagnant mind and the death of curiosity. This is sign number 5, and honestly, it's arguably the most tragic one of them all. A gifted mind is driven by this insatiable hunger to explore way beyond the surface. They ask why and how because they genuinely want to understand the intricate machinery of the world. But the less intelligent mind is completely satisfied with a surface-level understanding, and they actively avoid the uncomfortable vulnerability of not knowing. If your conversations never move past daily small talk or celebrity gossip, your brain has basically stopped expanding its knowledge base. You've settled for a dangerously low need for cognition, essentially putting your intellect on standby indefinitely. Now, I know that was a lot, and it can feel pretty heavy to confront all of this, so let's move to our final section, the rebuild, and how to actually rewire your brain. The absolute most important takeaway from this entire explainer is this. Intelligence is a behavior pattern. It is not some fixed biological trait you're just stuck with for life. Thanks to neuroplasticity, your brain is quite literally always changing. Just as rigid certainty and constant blame rewire your brain to stay stuck in a closed loop, adopting positive cognitive patterns can completely change your trajectory. But it all starts with one terrifying but incredibly liberating step: having the bravery to admit you might be wrong. That single admission is the very first true sign that you are actually smarter than you think. So, as we wrap up this explainer, I've got a challenge for you. I want you to be brutally honest with yourself. Look at the cognitive patterns you've been consciously or even subconsciously ignoring and ask yourself, which of these signs felt like an absolute gut punch? Was it the extreme certainty, the constant blame shifting, the death of curiosity? Drop the number of the sign that hit you the hardest in the comments below, because confronting that uncomfortable truth, that is exactly where real intelligence begins.